The first time Zachary Zane laid eyes on the rusted "Welcome to Pinewood" sign, he almost turned his Lamborghini around. The population number, just 2,407, made him question his sanity. What had possessed one of America's most successful hotel magnates to abandon Manhattan for this speck on the map? The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Zachary drove through town, drawing stares from locals who rarely saw vehicles worth more than their annual income. His real estate agent had warned him that Pinewood wasn't ready for someone like him, but that was precisely why he'd chosen it. After 15 years of building a hotel empire worth billions, he craved anonymity and silence. The Lamborghini crawled up a winding road toward his new property, a restored farmhouse on 30 acres of woodland that had cost less than his Manhattan penthouse's annual maintenance fees. As he approached the private driveway, his phone rang. The caller ID displayed his CFO's name. "Tell me you haven't actually gone through with this ridiculous sabbatical," said Marcus without preamble. Zachary sighed. "I'm literally pulling into the driveway as we speak. The board is in uproar. They think you're having a midlife crisis at 38. "The board will survive without me for 6 months, Zachary replied, surveying the property. The white farmhouse stood proudly against the backdrop of pine trees, its wraparound porch exactly as promised. "I've earned this break, Marcus. 15 years without a vacation. Zane Hotels runs itself now." "That's the problem. People are speculating you're preparing to sell. Let them speculate." Zachary parked and stepped out, the scent of pine immediately filling his lungs. "I'll check in weekly. Otherwise, consider me unreachable." He ended the call before Marcus could protest further. The silence that followed was so complete it felt like a physical presence. No car horns, no construction, no constant hum of 8 million people going about their lives, just birdsong and the whisper of wind through pine needles. For the first time in years, Zachary felt his shoulders relax. The farmhouse exceeded his expectations. The real estate agent had hired local craftsmen to renovate it according to his specifications, modern amenities hidden within rustic charm. The kitchen featured top-of-the-line appliances disguised behind reclaimed wood cabinetry. The master bedroom offered a panoramic view of the mountains without a single neighbor in sight. Zachary unpacked the essentials and settled onto the porch with a glass of bourbon as darkness fell. Stars appeared more than he'd ever seen from his Manhattan penthouse. The vastness of the night sky made his empire feel suddenly insignificant. By morning, the novelty had worn off. Zachary awoke restless, unaccustomed to the lack of schedule. He decided to explore the town, hoping to find decent coffee. He opted for his less conspicuous Range Rover rather than the Lamborghini. Pinewood's Main Street stretched only 4 blocks, with storefronts that looked unchanged since the 1950s. A hardware store, a diner, a small bookshop, and a post office made up the business district. Zachary parked in front of Pinewood Perk, a coffee shop with mismatched furniture visible through the window. The bell above the door announced his entrance, and several faces turned to appraise him. The message was clear: stranger. "Morning," said the barista, a young man with an impressive beard. "What'll it be?" "Double espresso," Zachary replied, scanning the limited menu. "Not from around here, are you?" the barista asked as he worked the espresso machine. "Just moved in," Zachary answered, keeping his tone neutral. "The old Peterson farmhouse," the barista whistled. "That place sat empty for years. Must have cost a fortune to fix up." Zachary shrugged noncommittally. He'd specifically instructed his real estate agent to be discreet about his identity and wealth. The last thing he wanted was to become the town curiosity. "If you're looking to stock up on groceries," the barista continued, sliding the espresso across the counter, "Farmers Market opens in about an hour in the town square, best produce in the county." Zachary thanked him and found a corner table, pulling out his phone to check emails. The coffee shop's Wi-Fi was surprisingly strong, and he lost track of time responding to urgent messages from his executive team. When he finally looked up, the place had emptied, and sunlight streamed through the windows at a different angle. Remembering the farmer's market, He decided fresh food would be a welcome improvement over the basic provisions his housekeeper had stocked. The town square was easy to find, a small patch of green with a gazebo at its center, now surrounded by white tents and folding tables laden with local products. The market wasn't large, perhaps 20 vendors in total. Zachary wandered through, surprised by the quality of offerings. Artisanal cheeses, homemade bread, jams, and produce that looked fresher than anything available at his gourmet market in Manhattan. He was examining a display of heirloom tomatoes when a voice startled him. "Those are Cherokee purples. Best tomato you'll ever taste." Zachary looked up to find a woman watching him with amusement. Her curly auburn hair was loosely gathered at the nape of her neck, and freckles dusted her sun-kissed face. She wore overalls and a faded blue t-shirt, her hands stained with earth. "I'll take your word for it," he replied, picking one up. "They're certainly unique-looking." "Ugly as sin, but sweet as heaven," she laughed. "First time at our market, first time in Pinewood, actually." "Ah, you must be the mysterious buyer of the Peterson place," she said, eyes brightening with interest. "Word travels fast around here." Zachary felt a flicker of annoyance, so much for anonymity. "Zachary Zane," he said, offering his hand. "Ruby Nelson," she replied, wiping her palm on her overalls before shaking his hand. Her grip was firm, her skin warm. "These are all from my farm, Nelson Family Organics, just outside town." Zachary glanced at the array of vegetables displayed on her table, each imperfect in a way that suggested authentic farming rather than commercial production. "I'll take some of everything," he decided impulsively. "I'm still stocking my kitchen." Ruby's eyebrows rose. "Everything." "That's quite an order." "I appreciate quality," he said simply. He began selecting items while Ruby gathered them into a wooden crate. "What brings you to Pinewood?" she asked as she worked. "We don't get many newcomers, especially ones who buy the largest property in the county." Zachary considered his answer carefully. Seeking a change of pace, Manhattan was getting loud. "Manhattan," Ruby whistled. "That's quite a change. What did you do there?" "Hotels," he answered vaguely. "Corporate work." Ruby seemed to sense his reluctance to elaborate. "Well, Pinewood will certainly give you quiet, sometimes too much of it." As she totaled his purchases, Zachary noticed calluses on her hands and a quiet confidence in her movements. She was nothing like the polished, ambitious women he typically encountered. "That'll be $47, she said. Zachary pulled out his wallet and handed her a 50. "Keep the change. Appreciate it, but we don't do that here," Ruby said, counting out his change precisely. $3 exactly. "Come back next week. I'll have heirloom melons that'll make you forget you ever lived in New York." Something about her straightforward manner intrigued him. "I might take you up on that." Carrying his crate of vegetables back to the Range Rover, Zachary found himself looking back at Ruby's stand. She was chatting animatedly with an elderly couple, her laugh carrying across the square. For the first time since arriving in Pinewood, Zachary felt a stirring of interest. The next morning, Zachary woke with purpose. He made espresso using beans purchased from a local roaster at the market and stepped onto his porch to plan his day. The vegetables from Ruby's stand had made for an unexpectedly delicious dinner, a simple salad that tasted nothing like the carefully sourced produce he was accustomed to in Manhattan. His phone buzzed with messages he should answer, contracts he should review. Instead, he silenced it and decided to explore his property. The previous owner had maintained a network of hiking trails through the woods, and Zachary spent hours following them, discovering a small lake hidden among the pines. By Thursday, restlessness drove him back to town. He found himself at Pinewood Perk again, ordering coffee and casually asking the barista about local attractions. "Not much to do unless you like fishing or hiking," the young man, whose name Zachary had learned was Josh, replied. "Though Ruby Nelson leads wildflower walks on Thursday evenings. Educational and whatnot, people seem to enjoy them." Zachary tried to appear only mildly interested. Where would one sign up for something like that? Just show up at the trailhead by Blackberry Creek at 6. Can't miss it. Ruby's truck is hard to miss. Bright red Ford from the 70s. At 5:45, Zachary parked beside a vintage red pickup that had seen better days. A small group of people, mostly older couples, and a few younger women gathered nearby. Ruby stood at the center, dressed in hiking boots and cargo pants, a field guide in hand. She noticed him immediately, surprise flashing across her face before she smiled. "Manhattan joins us for wildflowers. Now I've seen everything." The group turned to look at him, curiosity evident. "I heard it was educational," Zachary replied, feeling uncharacteristically self-conscious. "It's mostly an excuse to walk slowly and appreciate things most people ignore," Ruby said. "But since you're here, welcome to Wildflower Thursday." For the next hour and a half, Zachary followed the group along a gentle trail while Ruby pointed out native species, explaining their medicinal uses and ecological importance. Her knowledge was impressive, her passion for the natural world obvious in every word. "How does someone become so knowledgeable about plants?" he asked as they headed back toward the parking area. The group dispersed ahead of them. Ruby shrugged. "Grew up on that farm you bought from yesterday. When you work with the land, you either learn its secrets or you fail. Botany degree. Environmental science from the state university. Came back to take over the family farm when Dad's arthritis got bad." She glanced at him. "What about you? What does a Manhattan hotel guy know about?" Zachary hesitated, then decided a partial truth was better than a lie. "I own a chain of hotels." Taking some time off to recalibrate, Ruby's eyes widened slightly. "A chain, huh? Like Holiday Inn or something?" He couldn't help but laugh. "Not exactly. Zane Hotels." Now her step faltered. "Wait, Zane Hotels, the luxury places. The ones with the insane penthouses that cost more per night than my truck is worth." "That would be them," he admitted. Ruby stared at him. "So you're not just some corporate guy, you're the corporate guy, the billionaire CEO I've seen in business magazines when I'm waiting at the dentist." Zachary winced. So much for keeping a low profile. "I'd prefer if that information didn't become general knowledge around town." Ruby studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Your secret's safe with me, but I have to ask why Pinewood? You could be anywhere in the world." "That's exactly why. Everyone expects me everywhere else." They reached the parking area, and Zachary paused beside his vehicle. "I've spent 15 years building something that consumed every waking moment. I need to remember what else exists." Ruby's expression softened. "Well, wildflowers are a decent place to start." She opened her truck door, then looked back at him. "If you're serious about reconnecting with something real, I could use an extra pair of hands at the farm tomorrow, early harvest day before the weekend market." The offer surprised him. "I'm not exactly experienced with farm work." "That's the point," Ruby said, a challenge in her smile. 6M 1487 Orchard Lane, wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty." Without waiting for his answer, she climbed into her truck and drove away. Zachary stood in the fading light, oddly invigorated by the invitation. For the first time in years, someone wanted his hands, not his money or influence. The alarm blared at 5:30, and Zachary questioned his sanity as he dressed in jeans and a plain t-shirt. Manhattan associates would faint seeing him without his tailored suits. He made strong coffee, poured it into a travel mug, and drove through the misty dawn to the address Ruby had provided. Nelson Family Organics was smaller than he'd expected, perhaps 20 acres of cultivated fields surrounding a modest farmhouse with a large red barn. Ruby's truck sat in the gravel driveway. As Zachary parked beside it, the front door opened and Ruby emerged, carrying 2 straw hats. "You actually came," she said, looking genuinely surprised. "I thought billionaires valued sleep." "I've been up since 5 most days since I was 23, he replied, accepting the hat she offered. "Though usually for conference calls with Asia, not whatever we're doing. Harvesting summer squash, zucchini, and the first tomatoes," Ruby said, leading him toward the fields. "Dad's already out there, he'll get a kick out of this." Gerald Nelson turned out to be a weathered man in his 60s with the same auburn hair as his daughter, though liberally streaked with gray. He eyed Zachary with open suspicion. "So you're the city slicker who bought the Peterson place," he said by way of greeting. "Ruby says you want to learn about real work." Just looking to be useful, Zachary replied, meeting the older man's gaze. Gerald huffed. We'll see about that. Ever picked a vegetable that wasn't wrapped in plastic? By noon, Zachary's back ached, his hands were blistered, and sweat soaked his shirt. He'd filled countless crates with summer vegetables, learning the proper way to twist zucchini from their stems and test tomatoes for ripeness. Ruby worked alongside him, her efficiency making his efforts seem clumsy by comparison. Not bad for a first-timer, she said as they carried the last harvest crates to the washing station by the barn, though I think Dad was disappointed you didn't quit after the first hour. I've built a career on not quitting, Zachary replied, rolling his shoulders to ease the unfamiliar tension. Though I'll admit this is physically harder than boardroom battles, Ruby laughed. Different kind of endurance. Come on, lunch is part of the deal when you volunteer on a farm. Inside the farmhouse kitchen, Gerald was already setting the table while an older woman, Ruby's mother, Patricia, transferred a large pot of something aromatic from the stove. Hope you like vegetable soup, Patricia said warmly. It's what farmers eat when they're swimming in produce. Lunch was simple but delicious soup with freshly baked bread and garden salad. The conversation flowed easily, with Gerald interrogating Zachary about his business while Patricia scolded him for being nosy. So you built this hotel empire from scratch? Gerald asked, impressed despite himself. No family money, Dad, Ruby warned. It's fine, Zachary assured her. Yes, from scratch. Started with one rundown property in Atlantic City that I renovated myself and flipped for enough profit to buy 2 more. 15 years and 42 properties later, here we are. And now you're hiding in Pinewood, Gerald observed. Running from something or looking for something? The question was unexpectedly perceptive. Zachary considered it as he broke off a piece of bread. Maybe both. Success creates a bubble. After a while, you're surrounded by people who want something from you. It gets exhausting, Patricia nodded sympathetically. Well, no one here wants anything but an extra hand at harvest time. Speaking of which, Ruby says you're coming to the farmer's market tomorrow. Zachary glanced at Ruby, who suddenly seemed very interested in her soup. I hadn't planned on it, but I'm available if help is needed. We're short a person, Ruby explained. My usual Saturday helper just had a baby, thought you might want to see the other side of the market. I'll be there, Zachary said, surprised by his own eagerness. Later, as he prepared to leave, Ruby walked him to his car. You survived Dad's interrogation, most don't. I've faced tougher shareholders, Zachary replied. Then more seriously, thank you for today, it's been enlightening. How so? I've spent years creating luxury for people who already have everything. Today I harvested food that people actually need, he shrugged. There's something fundamentally satisfying about that. Ruby studied him, her expression thoughtful. You're not what I expected, Zachary Zane. Call me Zach, he said. Only business associates use my full name. Zach, she repeated, smiling. See you tomorrow, 5 a.m. sharp for market setup. The farmer's market looked different from behind the table. Zachary helped Ruby unload her truck in the pre-dawn darkness, arranging produce in artful displays as she directed. By the time customers began arriving, he'd mastered the basics of weighing vegetables and making change. You're a natural salesman, Ruby observed as Zachary chatted with an elderly woman about the virtues of different lettuce varieties. Though I suppose that shouldn't surprise me. People are people, he replied, whether they're buying a 5-star hotel experience or organic kale. As the morning progressed, Zachary noticed Ruby's easy rapport with the townspeople. She knew everyone by name, asked after family members, offered growing tips. She was rooted in this community in a way he had never been anywhere. During a lull, Ruby handed him a bottle of water. You keep looking at me strangely. Do I have dirt on my face? No, Zachary said, realizing he'd been staring. I was just thinking that you seem very connected here. It's admirable. It's just home, she said simply. I left for college thinking I'd never come back, but when Dad needed help. She shrugged. Turns out there are worse things than belonging somewhere. I wouldn't know, Zachary admitted. I've never belonged anywhere. Maybe that's why I built hotels, creating places for other people to feel at home, temporarily at least. Ruby's expression softened. That's actually kind of beautiful in a sad way. Before he could respond, customers approached, and they returned to work. By the end of the market, they'd sold almost everything, and Ruby was beaming with satisfaction. "Best Saturday in months," she said as they loaded the few remaining items back into her truck. "Your good luck, Zach, or just free labor," he joked. "That too." Ruby closed the truck's tailgate. "There's a tradition after market, a few of us vendors grab lunch at the Pinewood Diner. Would you like to join us?" Zachary surprised himself by immediately accepting. The old Zachary would have retreated to solitude and emails, but something was shifting in him, a curiosity about this world so different from his own. Lunch at the diner turned into drinks at Pinewood's only bar, which evolved into Ruby showing him the town's hidden gems, a swimming hole accessed through a cattle gate, a ridge overlooking the valley that turned golden at sunset, a hidden waterfall that required scrambling down a questionable path. As darkness fell, they found themselves sitting on the hood of Ruby's truck, watching stars emerge over the valley. "Thank you for today," Zachary said quietly. "All of it. For working you to the bone, then dragging you all over town," Ruby laughed. "Most people would be exhausted." "I am exhausted," he admitted. "But it's different from Manhattan exhaustion. That drains you. This feels more like, I don't know, like being used for something worthwhile." Ruby turned to look at him, her expression serious in the moonlight. "Can I ask you something personal?" "After today, I think that's allowed. Are you happy? With your life, your success, all of it?" The question hung between them, deceptively simple yet profound. Zachary considered it carefully. "I was," he said finally, "or I thought I was. Building something from nothing, seeing it grow, that brings satisfaction. But lately," he struggled to find the right words. "Lately it feels hollow, like I've been climbing a mountain only to realize the view isn't what I expected." Ruby nodded, her gaze returning to the stars. "That's why you're really here, isn't it? Looking for a different view?" "Maybe," Zachary admitted. "I didn't expect to find it at a farmer's stand, though." The words hung between them, charged with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Ruby cleared her throat and slid off the hood. "It's getting late," she said. "Some of us have farms to run in the morning." "Right," Zachary replied, following her lead. "I should let you get home." As they drove back toward town in separate vehicles, Zachary realized he hadn't checked his phone all day, a first in more than a decade. Over the following weeks, Zachary fell into a new rhythm. Mornings at his farmhouse, attending to essential business matters remotely. Afternoons often spent at Nelson Family Organics, where Gerald grudgingly accepted his help and gradually began teaching him about sustainable farming practices. Evenings frequently involved Ruby, sometimes formal invitations to community events, sometimes spontaneous text messages about sunset views or local bands playing at the bar. He found himself looking forward to these moments, planning his days around the possibility of seeing her. When Ruby mentioned a problem with the farm's irrigation system, Zachary spent hours researching solutions and offered to fund improvements. Ruby refused. "We can't accept that kind of help," she said firmly. "This isn't a charity case." "It's not charity," Zachary argued. "It's an investment in a local business I believe in." Ruby's expression softened. "I appreciate that, but the farm has to stand on its own or it has no future. We'll figure it out the way we always have." Her independence both frustrated and fascinated him. In Manhattan, people maneuvered endlessly for his financial support. Ruby seemed determined to succeed without it, even when struggling. One rainy afternoon in early September, Zachary arrived at the farm to find Ruby sitting on the porch steps, looking dejected. "What's wrong?" he asked, joining her under the shelter of the roof. "The cooperative we sell to in Portland is cutting back their orders," she said. "Economy's tight, people buying less organic. They're going with cheaper suppliers. How bad is it?" Ruby ran a hand through her hair, which had fallen loose from its usual ponytail. "Bad enough. That contract was 40% of our income. Without it..." She didn't finish the sentence. Zachary's mind immediately began calculating solutions. "Have you considered direct sales to restaurants? High-end places will pay premium for quality like yours." "I've tried. The volume isn't consistent enough for most restaurants, and we're too far from major cities for daily delivery." Zachary hesitated, then decided to risk her pride. Zane Hotels sources all produce locally for our restaurants. We have 4 properties within 100 miles of here. Ruby looked up sharply. Are you offering what I think you're offering? A business proposition, he said carefully. No charity, your produce is excellent and our chefs would appreciate it. We pay fair market rates plus a premium for certified organic. You do that, Ruby's voice was quiet. I'd introduce you to our regional purchasing manager. The produce would have to speak for itself. He paused. Ruby, I would have made this connection weeks ago if you hadn't been so adamant about doing everything independently. She was silent for a long moment, rain pattering on the roof above them. I'm not used to accepting help, she finally said. Especially not from someone like you. Someone like me? Someone who could buy this entire valley without blinking. It creates an imbalance. Zachary turned to face her fully. Is that how you see me? Just a billionaire? Ruby met his gaze, her green eyes troubled. No, that's the problem. I don't understand. I see you, Zach. The man who shows up at dawn to help harvest, who listens to Dad's farming lectures without checking his phone, who remembers my mother's birthday. Her voice grew quieter. The man I'm falling for, despite knowing better. The confession hung between them, unexpected and raw. Zachary felt his heart rate accelerate. Why would falling for me be something you know better than to do? He asked carefully. Ruby laughed without humor. Because you're temporary, Pinewood is your sabbatical, not your life. In a few months, you'll return to penthouses and board meetings and women who make sense in your world. What if that's not what I want anymore, isn't it? Ruby challenged. You've built an empire, Zach. People like you don't walk away from that to farm vegetables in a town where the biggest event is the annual pie contest. Zachary reached for her hand, surprised when she didn't pull away. 2 months ago, I would have agreed with you, but something's changing in me here. He struggled to articulate the transformation he felt. For 15 years, I've measured success in acquisitions and profit margins. Here, I'm learning to measure it differently in heirloom tomatoes and community connections and moments of genuine purpose. And when the novelty wears off. Ruby asked, but her fingers tightened around his. That's just it. This doesn't feel like novelty, it feels like discovery. He moved closer. I'm falling for you too, Ruby, not as some rural escape fantasy, but because you challenge me to be authentic in a way I've never been before. Rain continued to fall around them, creating a private world on the porch. Ruby's expression remained guarded, but something in her eyes softened. I won't be a billionaire's country diversion, she said firmly. I would never ask you to be, Zachary replied. What I'm trying to figure out is how to be worthy of a woman who values integrity over luxury and community over status. Ruby studied him for a long moment, then leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and over almost before it began. I'm probably going to regret this, she murmured. Zachary smiled. I'll do everything in my power to make sure you don't. As fall turned the surrounding forests to gold and crimson, Zachary and Ruby's relationship deepened. He continued helping at the farm while connecting Nelson Family Organics with his hotel suppliers. The contract they secured ensured the farm's financial stability without compromising Ruby's independence. Meanwhile, Zachary found himself extending his sabbatical indefinitely. His executive team managed operations effectively without him, and his weekly video conferences became increasingly brief as he delegated more authority. When Ruby finally invited him to Sunday dinner as her official boyfriend, Gerald simply nodded and said, "About time you admitted it." Patricia squeezed Zachary's hand and whispered, "She's never brought anyone home before." One crisp October evening, as they walked the perimeter of Zachary's property discussing possible uses for the fallow fields, he broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. "I need to go back to New York next week," he said. "Board meeting I can't miss." Ruby's step faltered slightly. "For how long?" 3 days, but there's something I want to discuss before I go." Zachary stopped walking and turned to face her. "I've been thinking about the future." "My future specifically?" And Ruby's voice was carefully neutral. "I'm restructuring Zane Hotels, promoting my COO to CEO, moving myself to chairman of the board. It would mean quarterly meetings in New York, some travel to our international properties, but not the day-to-day operations. Hope flickered in Ruby's eyes. You're stepping back from running the company? I'm choosing a different life, Zachary corrected. One that aligns with what matters to me now, which is, this community, building something sustainable rather than just profitable. He took both her hands in his. I'm not the same man who drove into Pinewood 3 months ago. That man was successful but empty. You've shown me what it means to be rooted, to belong somewhere. Tears welled in Ruby's eyes. Are you sure about this? Your company is your legacy. And it will continue, but I want to build a new legacy now. Zachary took a deep breath. I want to convert this property to an organic teaching farm, partnering with your family's expertise. Create an agricultural education center where people can learn sustainable practices. Ruby stared at him in disbelief. You want to become a farmer? I want to use my resources for something meaningful, Zachary corrected, while learning from the best farmer I know. That would be my father, Ruby said automatically, then laughed through her tears. Zach, this is crazy. Is it? Manhattan never felt like home. This place does. He paused, gathering courage. Especially when you're here with me, understanding dawned in Ruby's eyes. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Zachary released her hands only to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small wooden box. I had this made from a branch of the oak tree where we first kissed, he said, opening it to reveal a simple but elegant ring, a small diamond nestled in a band of polished wood. Ruby Nelson, I love you for showing me what truly matters. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Ruby's hand flew to her mouth, tears now flowing freely. For a terrifying moment, Zachary thought he'd misread everything, then she launched herself into his arms. Yes, she whispered against his neck. Yes, billionaire farmer, I will marry you. Zachary held her tightly, the setting sun painting the surrounding fields gold. He had come to Pinewood seeking escape and found purpose instead. In the most unexpected place, a simple farmer's stand, he had discovered the one thing his billions couldn't buy. A place to belong and a woman brave enough to love the man beneath the wealth. As they walked hand in hand back toward the farmhouse, plans for their future flowing between them, Zachary silently thanked whatever impulse had led him to this tiny town. Sometimes the greatest fortunes were found where you least expected them.